It's Tuesday, January 24th, 2017, and this is a meeting of the Law and Ordinance Committee. To my right is Ms. Lynn Snee, and to my left is Mr. Bobby Phillips, and we have 3 items on the agenda. Mr. Titterington, will you be leading the discussion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. First item is regarding a rezoning of 214 South Mulberry Street. The Planning Commission did determine unanimously to recommend that council approve the rezoning of that parcel, which is near the intersection of South Mulberry and Race, from M2 Light Industrial to B2 General District Business. They determined that it is consistent with the zoning code, the surrounding zoning districts, does not create spot zoning, and it's consistent with the concepts of the Troy Comprehensive Plan. The public hearing was held on January 17th, and there was no objections. There were no objections. We are not asking for emergency legislation.
Ms. Snee, do you have any comments or questions?
I do not.
Mr. Phillips?
No, sir, I do not.
Any other councilmen have any comments or questions? Anyone in the audience? What is your pleasure?
Move forward.
Mr. Phillips?
I concur, thank you.
It's unanimous. We move forward with this. Next.
Medical marijuana. The Planning Commission took another look at proposed recommendations related to dispensaries, cultivation, and processing of medical marijuana. Made a unanimous recommendation to the council that cultivators and processing be prohibited within the corporate boundaries, but that up to 3 dispensaries be allowed within the highway business district only.
B4.
B4.
Ms. Snee, do you have any comments or questions?
Do you know if we have any updated information about whether or not there will be a limited number of licenses available within the state for dispensaries?
We only know what the draft regulations. They have not been finalized yet. I'm speaking off the top of my head, but I believe up to 40 dispensaries across the state are allowed. There are 88 counties, so less than 1 per county. It's not restricted. I mean, all 40 could be, I suppose, in 1 county. Not expecting that will happen. And then there are very specific business plan and fee structures related restrictions before you can get a state permit.
I don't have any other questions.
Yes, and I'm going to further test your memory here, but could you briefly, for the folks that will listen to this and then our folks in the audience, would you briefly outline what those licensing requirements are that you can cover? Because it's quite an expensive process. It's
I know that successful applicants have to pay a 6-figure fee initially, and then every 2 years it's $20,000 to $40,000 to renew that license. There are specific; these are draft regulations related to. Number one, you have to have you have to prove that you have a specific income stream, a minimum revenue stream before you can be granted a license. If you are to dispense, in addition to the various requirements on what kind of products that you can dispense, you need to have a medical professional, and there's 2 or 3. You can have a doctor or a nurse or a pharmacist, and there may be a couple of others that are eligible as well. I believe within 5 minutes, very quick, of dispensing product to somebody who has the card, you must update the statewide database so that, much like they do with the prescription drugs, it is tracked as to who has what and when. I believe those are the highlights. I may have missed one or two.
And the figures of the money licensing or permitting fees that you're talking about, those are just state fees.
Those are state fees. We don't see that money.
Right. So we have not
Local
established any fees that we may have on
Our
top
fees,
of it.
our fees would be no different than any of the other business application fees that we have. There's no special fee involved.
And there are also security items that are related to these businesses that they are very strict on. There are other regulations that it's not going to be some fly-by-night organization that's going to be operating these things. So I think it's very important for the public to be aware of that this is not just some little, I hate to use this in somewhat of a derogatory fashion, but a vapor store where you just, stand outside and partake of whatever medicine you may or may not have just gotten. So I don't have that fear with this sort of thing.
And
I think that's all I have at the moment.
And I think I asked this last time. Have we looked at separating the cultivation and processing away from the location of the dispensaries as far as the legislation goes?
Well, there's really no need to. If there appeared to be unanimous support for prohibiting cultivation and processing, and so having it part of the same ordinance, it's going to be in the same section of the zoning code. So there's really, in our mind, the state law gives us the local control over those three items, and so Planning Commission wanted to address all three. Planning Commission was adamant that cultivation and processing be completely prohibited as a recommendation to you.
I don't know where in the city you could have the space to do something like that, but and just to tie on to what Mr. Phillips was saying, there are only about 20 different medical conditions that medical marijuana can be dispensed for. Is that correct?
I'm not well versed on it. I mean, I think we have to be careful because,
It's very specific.
dispensing is more of a recommendation depending on who gives the card away, because, there's a distinction between making the recommendation and providing the card versus prescribing it. I don't pretend to be, a lawyer or even a medical professional that can tell the difference.
Any other councilman have any comments or questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Heath?
The last meeting that we had, we heard from some really good people about the benefits, and they're very passionate about what the products can do for people when they're hurting and different things, which I can really appreciate. That's an important thing, and you never know what the future holds out there. We all are very vulnerable to getting sick at different levels, so I would not want to take those benefits away from people or say that they can't use that. Just to clarify, we're not talking about the usage. So if someone wants to use marijuana, hand cream, and different things that are going to help their arthritis and all that, they're perfectly able to use that within Troy, whether we have 0, 3, 5, all of that. Is that correct?
That's
the
correct.
usage is
That's correct. We're not
totally
banning the
allowed.
usage. It's just from a business standpoint.
Yes.
Would three businesses be able to dispense legally
Right.
within Troy?
Right. So all the people that are mentioning the benefits and of the products themselves, we're not discussing that at all. They're completely able to use that. What I'm more concerned about are the physical locations and what they look like or what message they can send to kids and things like that. I just did a quick Google search, which is always accurate. But just looking at medical marijuana dispensaries, I put Google search and then images, just to try to pull up and see what exactly these things are looking like across the country. Obviously, it's free enterprise and capitalism. They can do whatever they want at that point as long as they're within the regulations of the city's sign limits. But I'm seeing just the top couple here, high-level health, with the high represented in green, medical with a full marijuana plant, medical marijuana, again with a plant next to smoke shop, Koosh Doctor is the name of this one, cannabis station with a plus underneath it. So these are images that aren't necessarily what these retail companies would look like, but they're possible for those to look like that. And I'm just worried that with all the different kids and different thing out there, all the pressures for people to use that, I don't want them to have one more argument to their buddies saying, yeah, did you see that marijuana leaf in the next to Walmart over there? So I just don't understand the benefit of having these within Troy. We're not limiting the ability for people to use this and have the health benefits of all that. The last thing I want to see is somebody that's hurting not be able to use a product that would help them. So please go get the product and have that there. I just don't see the benefit and the trade-off to have these types of messages being sent out in these stores next to Walmart and those types of things with a big marijuana leaf in it. That's where my kind of concerns are coming from. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else have any comments or questions? Okay.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Schaefer. I live at 26.5 North Short Street. I was wondering, why can't these dispensaries go out in the county? Why do they have to be in the city limits?
Oh, they can. It's just that these recommendations, we're only allowed to recommend and discuss within the corporate boundaries. What the townships and other cities and communities do is up to them.
Okay, so it's City of Troy, period. It's
Correct.
making this, okay. Why do we have to have 3 dispensers? Why can't we have 1?
That's
We make
kind
it
of a
0.
rhetorical question. I mean, the recommendation from the Planning Commission was 3, or
Okay.
is 3.
I'm just asking one. I'm just asking about it. I don't know that much about it. Actually, I'm against marijuana medical on the fact that if they do take it and they are in there and they go get a drug test, they're not protected under the law of the bill. They could lose their jobs. I think everybody should kind of think about that. I'm in pain every day from post polio, and I personally changed my diet, and I got off my cane back in 2000 after being on the cane for 15 years. So I've done other alternative things to help me get through there. I'm not basically against it. There were some questions that people have asked me about, and so I thought I'd say something. Okay, and I like your idea. I think it should be. And when I think of marijuana leaves, I think of Buckeye leaves on their helmets, and so people might come in and see that, maybe thinking that. I know that's you see them all the time on there, and that is the Buckeye leaf on there, but it looks like marijuana. So I don't know if you think of that at all. So thank you for it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes. I have some questions. I believe you mentioned something about people with, I'm Deborah Duncanson, sorry. You mentioned something about people being able, that have these conditions, to go outside the city limits. Unlike most of us, some of these people don't have cars, and that would create a great hardship. I'm very much for people that have, disabilities that have access to treatment, and this would be could be prohibitive. They use public transportation, and that concerns me. The other issue is I am very much against anybody raising the issue of one of these. That's a monopoly, and that gives too much power to one person or entity, what have you. My other concern is the B4 zoning area. Isn't that land predominantly, if not entirely, owned by very wealthy people and or corporations in some capacity? That bothers me a lot because I came from a family that started small businesses that grew. And I think it's very un-American to have the requirements. And I know you have nothing to do here with the state as far as the 170,000 and then a few years later the 20,000 or whatever. But that's also, it's beyond me why they would do that. The other issue is, why not only allow pharmacies, stores that sell liquor and or tobacco in only the B4 section? We don't do that. This is discriminatory. I'm seeing lawsuits. I have a law degree. This really concerns me. I don't know, maybe I did go to Berkeley, but I see both sides of I'm very liberal, but I also am conservative. I'm a mother, I am a grandmother. I watched my father die of throat cancer, never smoked. I watched my mother die of a brain tumor. I don't want to see people suffering, and this really concerns me. And we're more concerned about marijuana, it seems, in this state since I've moved here. I see this. It's an observation coming from outside where I would walk down the streets and every block see dispensaries and people were not smoking it on the streets in California. But what concerns me is that we have a horrible heroin epidemic in this state.
We're just talking about
and
marijuana.
I understand that, but I am making the comparison to marijuana and our concerns on this. And it's just beyond me. We are talking people, according to the state law, it's not going to be allowing people to smoke it in any form or to sell it in any form. They do allow vaping. They do allow other forms. And so we're not into that scenario. So if someone brings up, oh, it's a medical marijuana art shop, and there's going to be kids hanging outside, and I'm totally family oriented. My daughter turned out to be a nurse practitioner. I'm saying, being a parent is difficult. I have been there, but she turned out okay. And like most kids, teenagers can be difficult. But what I'm saying is we're looking at medical marijuana. And I think, like the gentleman said at the council meeting, the problem we have with the word marijuana, that's why I just feel like there's so much discrimination in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
A. Shannon, 1560 Windridge, Apartment D, Troy. And I'm sure you're surprised that I'm here. I just want to add a few things. Mr. Titterington, you did a really excellent job of summarizing a lot of what the law is looking at. The state is recommending at this point the 40 dispensaries. My expectation is that's what will pass. That is equivalent to what most of the other states that do the medical piece have per capita within their states. And so that's why I expect that 40 is what we will see within Ohio. I understand the concern with monopoly and with trying to create a little bit of competition among stores so that you can have some better prices maybe. But the reality is we are looking at one store, one dispensary per every other county. I see no reason to say that we need to have 3, and I think it's fine if we say we want to have one dispensary to start with. I'm also in total agreement with the ban of the processing and the growth within Troy. There isn't a place to do it safely, appropriately. I understand Mr. Heath's concern about, we're allowed to use, but we could buy elsewhere. That's true. But again, we are talking about people who are sick, who don't all have transportation, who don't all have easy access to be able to talk to friends, neighbors, et cetera, to get someplace. And I don't know if you've checked with Miami County Transit lately, but it doesn't work very well. So if it's not something that's reasonable and close, then you have people that aren't going to be able to have access to this. And it is something that is important. I actually this morning spent time with my neurologist and found out that I'm at the last phase. There is nothing left for me when it comes to my migraine medication. And she is willing to write me the recommendation tomorrow for medical marijuana. And to kind of further clarify, doctors will be doing recommendations. You then have to be approved by the state to get a card. So this is not something that's easy to access. And it's not something that the dispensaries are going to be easy, like you say, Mr. Phillips, fly by night. It's going to be people who are screened and who are checked before they are able to open these. People who are wanting to access the medication are going to be screened and checked as well. And I don't know if people have looked into seeing what medical dispensaries look like on the inside, but typically when you walk in, there is a vestibule. That's where you're checked, your card is checked, things are looked at. Then you go into the area where the marijuana is, so it's not like kids are going to be in there roaming around checking out what there is. I also happened to pull a Google search and found Ammos R Us, and there's one interesting one. Well, I'm not going to find it again that quick. You know, we have CR Butts down the street from me. The reality is sometimes that stuff is out there, but I also think zoning has an ability to, when someone does apply, to be able to say that we have a certain standard and we have a certain expectation of what it's going to look like here in Troy. And I think that's reasonable. I think if you're getting into people who are truly wanting to dispense medical marijuana, they're wanting to do it in a way that's professional and appropriate. And if they don't, then we don't want them here, and that's fine. So just wanted to throw out some of those things, let you know that I am in support of just bringing it down to 1 if that's what we need to do. I'm still not appreciative of the fact that we're looking only at B4. I feel like that's kind of saying that because you're sick, we want you on the outside of town. And I know that's not the message that's intended, but that is the message that's received. I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
As I recall, when we started talking about medical marijuana, 6 months ago, there was no guidelines from the state, so that we didn't know how many dispensaries were going to be allowed within the state. So we were eliminating it to 3 within the city of Troy. That's the only reason why that number came out.
Well, if you recall, we initially started, I think, with 5, and then there was discussion about 0, then there was discussion about 3, nothing passed, and went back to planning modified. But you're right, the regulations, they are still in draft form. I believe the timing was such that the day after one of the public deliberations were held is when the initial draft regulations on dispensaries came out. So it's been an evolving process.
Right. Anyone else have any comments or questions?
I have one. I wanted to comment on cultivation and processing. Personally, I think we should allow it. We allow people to make their home brews, so to speak, as far as alcohol, which has killed far more people than marijuana has ever killed. That's my personal opinion. I saw it in California. People that really needed medical marijuana there got it. It was highly regulated. Believe it or not, in California, you had to have a card, you had to have the doctor to do it, and I do think we should allow cultivation and processing, and I think we should tax it personally, and then use that money to start funding this heroin problem we have in the state. Thank you.
Janet Griffith, 650 Orchard Drive. I am basically against having the marijuana, the 3 marijuana places here in Troy. I did some quick looking up this afternoon on for and against marijuana. A couple of them I'll read and just give you a couple of other ideas. Although I understand many believe marijuana is the most effective drug in combating their medical ailments, I would caution against this assumption due to a lack of consistent, repeatable scientific data available to prove marijuana's medical benefits. Based on current evidence, I believe that marijuana is a dangerous drug and that there are less dangerous medicines offering the same relief from pain and from other symptoms. Bill Frisk, a medical doctor. And another one, there is no scientific evidence that the effect of marijuana on diminishing pain is related to any specifically identified analgesic effect, that it unequivocally does produce short-term central nervous system euphoria which alleviates some pain centrally, best explains its mechanism for both reducing pain short-term during the period of influence, as well as causing the euphoria associated with addictive drugs of abuse. Additionally, there is no scientific evidence that long-term use of medical marijuana is either effective or safe for the treatment of chronic pain. And I know that my husband's been in law enforcement. Other relatives have been in law enforcement and have seen the work with drugs, and have ones in probation work, and they say heroin is at an epidemic here in the county, and if we start with marijuana, it advances. It just, you get your euphoria here, and you want more and more and more, and we don't need to invite problems to us. People that are addicted to marijuana are 3 times more likely to become addicted to heroin. And I know that when my folks moved us here 49 years ago, just about this month, thought this was a great family town, and it has been for the whole time. But I see, I'll say, cracks in the dam where, this is my opinion, you have your opinions. Now we have alcohol is allowed up to taste of town alcohol, and then we have it now. We're having it in the arena, and we're going to have it over at the Treasure Island. That's more work for the police. And under the effects of marijuana, they get on a high, they can cause accidents, car accidents. I mean, it's dangerous enough driving. You never know when the car's going to come across the yellow line at you. So, with alcohol is one thing, with under the influence of any drug is another. So, that's my opinion.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'd just like to comment. I came from California since '78. We don't have a heroin problem out there. Thank you. And there's a lot of people on medical marijuana.
Anyone else have any comments?
My name is Mickey Hammer. I live at 1160 Red Maple Drive. And I was here at the last council meeting and spoke a little bit about my thoughts on this. And one of the things that I didn't get to say at that time was we're kind of overlooking what's called the law of unintended consequences. So we put this in play with good intentions, but there are a lot of bad intentions that can come out of this. We will talk about our heroin epidemic, and a lot of the people who are on heroin, not a lot of them, I don't know any statistics, any numbers, but people who are on it, a lot of times they get hooked from medications that they get from prescription drugs, from doctors right now. We have the same type of situation that can be caused with medical marijuana. You may have something that you can say, my back hurts, or this hurts, or that hurts, and you can get a prescription for it, you can get a card for it, and not really need it. And that's one of those unintended consequences that I see coming down from this. It's if we don't let it come in to begin with, we don't have to worry about that. Maybe it'll be in another city, another county, or whatever, somewhere else in the county. That's fine. I just don't think that we need it here in Troy. And I've been here for a little under 2 years, as I said before. I must have lived in a different part of California than she lived in, because there's a lot of problems there, a lot of problems. So to think that they don't exist, they do. So again, my take on it is if we can keep it away for as long as possible, I think that's the best method to go after. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I had homes in Southern California, in the Palm Springs area, as well as San Francisco, Alameda, the Cathedral City, and so I've seen it all over the state.
Mrs. Sneed, do you have any?
I don't think I have any other questions right now.
What's your pleasure?
Well, I guess one thing I do want to make clear is that the decision that's in front of council is a decision to amend the zoning code. So it's a decision to act on a state-approved item, the state-approved use of medical marijuana, and to make a decision that if a dispensary business decided to locate in Troy, we would have regulations on the books that would say you may locate within this zoning district. I'm a little troubled that when I hear people say that we are deciding to have medical marijuana in Troy, because that's not our decision. That's an economic decision of whatever business decides to go forward and pursue one of these state licenses, which we've heard the number hasn't been set, but most likely will be something that will not even allow one per county. Whether or not that means that someone that would pay that large of a license fee would choose to locate in Troy, I'm not sure. But it is an item that was approved at the state level. We've heard plenty of people mention that they would like to have the ability in their location to be able to acquire this if it were recommended. So I think hearing the people who spoke at the public hearing that was held, and considering what we're actually approving, which is the zoning for the potential location of medical marijuana dispensaries, I would be in favor of moving forward.
And without putting any zoning in place at this point, we would be open to having medical marijuana in any business district, wherever.
Well, we have a moratorium in place right now, correct?
What's the
Once it
moratorium?
expires, yes,
Once it
that
expires.
moratorium cannot exist infinitely.
Mr. Phillips?
Thank you. Mrs. Snee echoes my thoughts exactly, and I think that you put that very eloquently, so I'm in support of the staff recommendation as proposed.
I am as well. Let's move forward with legislation to council regarding the
Before you
dispensaries.
now, you have the
So
legislation.
you're recommending to the
Yes.
council. We are not recommending emergency legislation, so.
Did I say emergency?
No.
Okay.
I'm just clarifying
that was a
that. I'm just
joke.
getting it out there. It's not a joke. I just wanted to put it on the record.
We're moving on to,
I just, B4, it didn't go anywhere in B4, is that how that reads?
That's correct.
yes. Mr. Chitterington, the liquor permit?
Next, we're on to the
Yeah.
next one? Oh. Nice segue there. So you did get supplemental information. The police department has reviewed the permit application for 1441 Stony Creek Drive for liquor permit for C1 beer only in original sealed containers carry out, wine and mixed beverages C2 in sealed containers for carry out. The police chief, I believe you have a memo from him that indicates that we have some concerns, reservations about this application, specifically related to the accuracy of some of the information that was provided to the Ohio Department of Liquor Control. And so, per the law, we are allowed to request that the state liquor control, hold a hearing. We are asking that you approve that so that the Liquor Control Board would have a hearing at the Miami County Safety Building.
Any questions?
Just one question. Once that hearing is held, do we then get a notice of, does anything come back to council once they hold that hearing and make a decision?
I believe, I'm not sure if we get an official notification of the decision, but the decision is solely with the Ohio Department of Liquor
Okay.
Control.
Mr. Phillips?
And off of that hearing, we can take an action to deny if that's
No, the only one who can deny a liquor
the state.
application is the state of Ohio.
Okay.
May I ask one more question? I'm assuming since the police department has asked for this hearing, would they then be present with any information that they had to present at the hearing?
We will
of
make
their
sure they're
concerns?
present for the hearing, yes.
Okay.
Can,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
can we ask what the reservations are that the police have,
I
or?
believe it's in your memo, but there was some
Just at the hearing.
omission of criminal record, I believe. That was left off of the application, which we think is material and something that the Liquor Control Board should take under consideration, and so we want to make sure that we have a hearing, that it gets on the record, and that the Liquor Control Board has that information before they make a decision.
Do you know if this information was found locally, or was this found at the state level after he had applied?
Our staff did research and found that information. I believe it's a state database, but we did
Yeah.
confirm the accuracy of that information.
Okay, but as it's indicated in the report here, or it's not indicated when that was found, but was that found by the state, or was that found by the
No,
police department?
we
locally?
discovered that.
We did?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all I had.
Anyone else on council have any comments or questions?
We are, no, I guess we are asking for emergency legislation, given the timing, because the permit process is fairly quick.
Anyone in the audience have any comments or questions? Move forward with emergency.
Move forward with emergency.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes, please.
Let's move forward with emergency legislation.
Thank you.
We're doing the Philpott Annex?
No,
No.
I believe that's a different committee.
Community and Economic
Oh,
Development.
You
Okay.
can, but they may be offended.
Filling in tonight for Mr. Kendall is Mr. Phillips. Is there anything else to come before law and ordinance?
No, sir.
We are